My recording topic is the Sepoy Mutiny and events that led to the uprising and insurrections on slave ships, and the events that led to like the civil rights movement. So during the Sepoy Mutiny, the British had came to the Indians' land to basically force them into like a pledge of allegiance to work for them and fight for them on the fight their enemies on their land. They had the infantry units and the people that went out to fight the battles that were from India, and the event that ultimately led and sparked the mutiny was, they had greased the shells with the fat of pigs and cows, which was like forbidden and a can't do for Muslims and Buddhists during in the country of India. So when Mango Pandy had found out about this basically drove him to a state of wanting to get back at the company for what they did, the lie that they told. So he was the first one to spark the mutiny, and others later joined in from the same country. So after he was dead, the country of India basically took the power into their own hands and drove the British off their land, which ended up giving them their freedom and the independence that they wanted. Comparing that to slave insurrections, the insurrections were more brutal and worse because the slaves had no weapons. They were actually being held in bondage and held captive. They had no weapons, they had no way of communicating with others, and it was a limited number of them. Even though it was more of them than it was the people that had the ship, they had no weapons. They had no way. They didn't know the ship. They weren't familiar with the ship. So when the opportunity came to fight back and to try to gain freedom, they took it, which meant they would have to give their lives to try to secure freedom in the best way that they could, or the best way that they knew how. Knowing that the outcome wasn't going to be that well, they still would have preferred that over going back to a foreign country and forced to be in labor for the rest of their lives or until they die. So comparing that to the Sepoy Mutiny, the Sepoy Mutiny, at least the Indians had guns and weapons, and they knew their country better than the British. But the Africans from the slave ships, they really had no way of defending themselves. All they had was each other, and any way they could to fight back. Versus the slave ships and the insurrections and the Sepoy Mutiny versus the Civil Rights Movement. The Civil Rights Movements were more peaceful because there wasn't a lot of bloodshed and fighting. It was more of a pacifist way of doing things, boycotting, having their own way of operating free from the whites, because the white only and black only places that they could shop or eat at or go and do laundry. But ultimately, all three just wanted independence and freedom from their oppressors, whether that was through fighting, talking, giving speeches, or even like just boycotting, walking through the streets, demanding more equality, more equality, equity, being treated like they were somebody instead of something. So this sparked, like, I feel like every mutiny, every uprising is basically founded on being as important as the next person, regardless of skin color, gender, or who they are or where they're from. It's all about like being equal and having the rights that the next person has, even if they're not from the country, even if they don't speak the same language, just being treated like someone instead of something. Just like the slaves were being treated as something, property. The Indians were being treated as property. If they was to like uprise or do anything, there would be some type of consequence. And the civil rights movement in the '60s, they were being treated as someone, just not like just they were being treated as someone, but just not. They were being treated like half the person that they were. In simple terms, having freedom, that the slaves didn't have, but not having the equality that the Indians didn't have. So they had freedom, which the Africans wanted, but they didn't have independence, complete independence like the Indians had. So things got better, but there were still some improvements that needed to take place. Now I have someone that's gonna come in and ask a few questions.
Why do you think that they gave? Why do you think? I'm sorry. Why do you think freedom looked like? What do you think freedom looked like over the course of multiple generations?
I think freedom looked like something that was attainable, but just was out of reach, but later became attainable through networking, working together, and slipping through the cracks, and just trying to attain it in any way that they possibly could.
Why did they see freedom as something to give their lives for?
Just to be treated equally as to be treated like someone instead of something, being treated as equals to other people regardless of race, skin color, gender, where they're from, and how they operated as a person versus what others feel like the norm is.
Did the conditions they were under force them to take matters into their own hands, even if it meant death, punishment, or imprisonment?
The conditions they were forced to be under definitely forced them to take matters into their own hands because no one was gonna come and save them. So they tried to secure freedom in any way that they possibly could, even if that meant the worst of the worst happening.
That's interesting. That's all the questions I have, I believe, at this time.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And that's the end of my presentation. Recording.